Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to give y'all an update on my book that I've been working on since December of 2021. If this is your first time hearing about my book or if you are just lost in general, I'll link Progress 1 in the description, as I would recommend watching it to understand stuff talked about in this video. Now, just as a refresher, since it's been about 4 weeks since I released Progress 1, I am basically writing a book called The Charm. The Charm is based off Storytime 40, which was about my 8th grade school year. In 8th grade, I struggled with depression as well as suicidal thoughts, which of course is what The Charm is based on. Because of this, The Charm's genre is horror, as this genre allows me to be as gory and as vulgar as possible to represent what it actually feels like to be suicidal. And also because horror is my favorite genre, so I might as well just make this process even more enjoyable. Anyways, to start this progress update, I'm going to go ahead and talk about quantitative progress. So as of me recording this, I am 317 pages into the charm and have 44 chapters written. This puts me at 55,534 words, meaning that the charm has officially surpassed Storytime 43 as the longest thing I've ever written by 9,000 words, and I'm only a little over a third done writing. So setting up a simple proportion, I can determine that if the second and third parts are the same length, then this book will be about 166,000 words on 951 pages. Note that this is an estimate, and not what might actually happen. The book might be far longer or far shorter, but I am estimating it to be between like 125,000 to 250 words. This might seem like a lot, but do remember that I write a chapter a day. And so if I write at this rate consistently, and every chapter I write is like 10 pages, I'll actually have the book finished in early November. Of course, this is also an estimation, but that should give a general idea of how far I am into it. So that's where the book's numbers are standing at right now. Let's talk about qualitative statistics. Particularly, let's talk about the plot progression. So the last progress update video ended off on chapter 25, which was the nightmare that involved my English teacher being the wife of a clown who likes killing people, and then I get killed by Justin. So chapter 26 starts off with me getting off the bus, science class, and in English. This is the day that Justin and Riley get back to school after their suspensions, so it's a pretty intense day. In fact, this day alone consists of 6 chapters, so you can bet it gets intense, and sure enough, it does. But chapter 26 in of itself isn't nearly as intense as other chapters for this day. It starts off with me and just building thoughts about Justin and stuff. On the bus ride, he nor Riley say a word. Me and Leslie don't speak either. Science is rather rudimentary, but then, at the beginning of English, my teacher pulls me to the side and asks me what's up. You might recall from an earlier chapter where my science teacher does this, and this is the same deal, just that it's my English teacher. My algebra teacher will do the same thing later on, but basically what happens is that my English teacher asks me if there is anything wrong, since she and the other teachers notice something is up. I tell her that everything is fine, and then English class starts. Then for chapter 27, we start to see some action. Right before I enter the gym, Justin and his buddy ambushes me and they hold me to a locker by my neck. Justin is ready to kill me, and then he and his buddy start talking about what Riley and her friends did to Leslie. I get super angry and manage to escape because I gain strength when I'm angry. Then in PE, Justin purposely hits me with a basketball, making me not only bleed, but also destroying my glasses. But the action doesn't stop there, because chapter 28 starts out with some. I'm at lunch, and Justin decides that he wants to fight me. He holds me against the wall, tries to beat me up until our algebra teacher comes over and breaks us up. I never fought back, so I don't get in trouble. But what does happen is that both my English and science teachers take me back to the English teacher's room and ask me some questions. They've been worried about me since the beginning of the semester, and they finally want to ask about it. At first, I didn't reveal too much, since I felt like they wouldn't understand me so that I wouldn't get called a snitch. But ultimately, after they seem to realize that I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, I ultimately reveal how Justin has treated me since the beginning of the school year, and what happened. They ultimately decide to have me eat lunch away from everyone in a cubicle near the principal's office. Nobody can see me, so it works out well, except just like it did in real life back in 8th grade when I ate in that cubicle, it made me feel worse about myself because everyone else was eating lunch together and having a good time while I had to eat lunch by myself because I had no friends. Then in chapter 29, we have art class. This is of course the time for me and Leslie to talk about feelings and stuff. This is when I learned that Riley and her friends did pretty much the same thing to Leslie, which is also the same thing Justin and his buddies did to me in chapter 27. However, what makes this chapter very disturbing is that Leslie reveals that she has been harming herself repeatedly. She talks about how good it feels and how it lets her release all of her frustration. Now in real life, I did harm myself during this time. This is how I felt when I harmed myself. I thought it was a good way to exchange my mental pain for physical pain, but in reality, it ultimately made me feel worse about myself. Self-harm will be extremely prevalent for the rest of the book, so it is a very important chapter to this degree. Chapter 30 is pretty much the same way, but on the bus, except Riley nor Justin board the bus, so me and Leslie talk some more. It's not a very important chapter, so I'll just move on. Chapter 31 is a swim practice chapter. Our coach has us do backstroke, but then people complain, so he makes us do a 600 IM. But then he makes me do a 1000 IM just because I am who I am, even though I never said a word during that practice. After the 1000 IM, he dismisses me and tells me that I'm a failure as a swimmer and stuff. Pretty much stuff that no coach should say to his team. Then chapter 32 is a nightmare chapter. This chapter at first starts out like a teenage dream, with it being very sexual in nature. Me and Leslie meet out in the field where we start making out. She then takes off her clothes and tries to get me to take off mine so we can of course have sex. But after I had only taken off my shirt, Justin, Riley, and a demonic figure appeared and the sexual tone of this chapter turns into an excruciatingly vulgar one. What happens is that they tie us up and Justin starts to brutally murder Leslie with an axe while Riley forces me to watch. I can't describe specifics about this nightmare due to the sheer nature of it, but once Leslie is finished, they do the same for me, except I wake up before the axe reaches me. Then in chapter 33, we have another swim meet. If you saw Storytime 19, you might recall a meet where my coach had me swim on Sunday rather than Saturday, which messed up all of our plans. Well, that is what happens here, except not only is he rude to me about it, but he is rude to my mom as well. Mom gets frustrated and takes me home. It is also revealed that the only reason I haven't quit the team is because of Dad, who wants me to swim, but he'll get into his head that my coach was a very mean guy, but it won't be until much later into the book. For chapter 34, we have another nightmare chapter. This is a very unusual nightmare because it's actually a lucid nightmare. I'm aware that I am in a dream. It starts off with me waking up and finding Leslie sitting by my bed. She then helps me get dressed and answers a few questions I have. She then takes me to the woods where it is revealed that she kidnapped Justin, Riley, and all their friends and has them all tied up to trees. But the best part is that they don't know they are there because they are all asleep. Leslie then hands me a lighter and a knife, and then we get our revenge by brutally murdering everyone tied up. But once everyone is killed, the demonic figure and an accomplice demonic figure show up and give Leslie a long and brutal death. They then try to hurt me, but I of course wake up before they can do anything. Then in chapter 35, we have the chapter where my algebra teacher asks me if everything is alright and stuff, and I tell him it is, and that's the end of it. But chapters 36 to 44 are all correlated with one another. Chapter 36, 37, 38, and 39 are also all extremely important chapters. The reason is because at the beginning of chapter 36, my art teacher takes me outside and begins crying. I am confused about why until she reveals some very, very tragic news. Leslie committed suicide. Chapter 37 takes us to the night before where Leslie actually kills herself. While I have been planning this chapter for a while now, it was nowhere near as violent as I thought it would be because I decided to exchange violence for emotionalism. This is by far the saddest and most emotional chapter in the book so far. And the reason is because Leslie is supposed to be the most beloved character in the book. So of course seeing her kill herself and having her feel how she feels is supposed to make the reader feel very sad. And you get an understanding of how Leslie felt during her final few minutes of her life and how she ultimately ended it by hanging herself. Then chapter 38 is my initial reaction to hearing the news and stuff. I basically go through all the motions of loss and it gets very brutal. Then later on, the principal invites me to come to her office where she is there waiting alongside a couple who just so happens to be Leslie's parents. They talk about how they're feeling and stuff and they invite me to Leslie's funeral. They also offer me to take me to their house, which is what I do in chapter 39. So there in chapter 39, we explore her room. Her parents talk about her and how she acted back when she lived in Virginia and stuff. They talked about how much she loved cheerleading, softball, and video games. That's when her dad handed me the charm she always wore and bestowed it to me as a gift. I greatly appreciate it and I start wearing the charm wherever I go. Then it is time for her funeral. At the beginning of the funeral, I looked over her coffin to see her lay. I give her a kiss on her cheek and then sit back down, where the preacher then goes out on from there. I didn't really hear a whole lot about what the preacher said, as I was too busy diving into my thoughts, but these thoughts are very important, as they are the first instance of suicidal thoughts coming from me. They'll build up greatly throughout the rest of the book. Then in chapter 40, me and Justin get into a fight on the bus. I end up shoving him off the emergency exit door and the bus has to park and all that. We fight because Justin mocks Leslie's death and just says a bunch of stuff you should never ever say about someone's death. Chapter 41 involves me and my parents talking the night of the fight about the fight. Mom is over here scolding me while Dad is trying to understand the reason. I had never told them about Leslie, and nor did I feel like it because I did not think they would believe me. So I did that, and then once dismissed, I went back to my room, where I began harming myself. This is the first of many instances where I harm myself in the book. Chapter 42 is a phone conversation between my parents, teachers, principal, and bus driver. This is when the principal reveals to my parents about what had been going on over the past week and basically gave a better explanation as to why I acted the way I did. In fact, she explained so well that my bus driver decided to let me back on the bus, so I went to school the next day. But that day hadn't come just yet. As in chapter 43, me and my parents once again have a conversation. This time, instead of having a scolding tone, they are extremely concerned. They have never heard about Leslie, so hearing how about her just shocked them. They basically helped me through this, and this is when I finally revealed that Leslie and I had been bullied and a bunch of other stuff. Then to wrap up this part of the book, we have Nightmare chapter for chapter 44. Just like in chapter 16, it involves a clown, and also like chapter 25, it involves my English teacher, who is apparently the wife of the clown. She too is dressed like a clown in this chapter, but this might actually be the most violent chapter I think I've ever written. So what happens is that instead of killing me, they reveal that they had kidnapped Justin and Riley. They then say that they are going to kill them. When we go outside of their house, we see Riley looking completely beaten up, dirty, and naked. Each of her wrists and ankles are tied together to a horse. Mr. Hinton then calls the English teacher's husband then calls the horses to go, and the horses start moving. Riley is then stretched like spaghetti, and then eventually her limbs are torn off and she lays there with no arms or legs. The clown then finishes her off with a chainsaw. He then does the same thing to Justin. After finishing him off, the demonic figure comes over, takes the chainsaw, and then tries to kill me. But like other nightmares, I wake up before it touches me, and that is where I am so far in the book. As for future plans, I'm getting closer and closer to a chapter I have deemed as the darkest chapter. This will be about 2/3 of the way into the book, and will be based off the events of March 8th, 2018. In fact, it will actually take place on that day. I still have a ways to go, but I'm getting very close to it. It will be far more vulgar than all other chapters in the book, even exceeding like the vulgarness of chapters 16 and 44. Therefore, my next progress video will be once I finish writing the darkest chapter. I do not know what chapter it will be, but it will probably be between maybe chapters 60 to 100. So that should be a good estimate for when progress 3 will be. Now the chapter between chapters 45 to the darkest chapter are going to be a lot more violent in nature. Of course, without Leslie to keep me stabilized, I dive deep into some very ridiculously dark and vulgar thoughts and do some very terrible things to myself. We'll also see me become super aggressive and act kind of like a stray cat of all things. As for progress updates after Progress 3, Progress 4 will be once I finish the book, Progress 5 will be once I have finished editing and taking out and rewriting chapters, and Progress 6 will be when the book is published. So yeah, that's the progress I have made so far in the charm. It's still going very smoothly and I am consistently making good progress. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you guys later. Bye!